Bum, bum, bum. That's a one for sure in the intro. On the inside, looking in. If I do it, nobody else is. You got a player going, Grimner.
Not me.
So, no?
No.
Okay. I was hearing me for a moment. Well, this is me, Vinny, right here on Real Liberty Media. And you can find that with a .com behind it. And rlmradio.xyz. And you can tune in over there and listen in and join the chat if you'd like.
And
Today
and on YouTube.
is
I say and
well,
on YouTube Live.
what? Oh, and okay, yeah. Thank you. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's where you're streaming right now. So if you're listening live, that's where you're catching it. Otherwise, over here at RLM, and so there'll be some chatters I suspect along there, and Grimner's here. He's on the inside. I'll scan out and a little bit here. We're gonna talk about well, a little bit of stuff I found to go along with this, some music, and see your true colors. Ugly like me. I'm on the inside, and I'm looking in, and that's from Stained. This is my life. Uh, I served my time, done the best I can. Grand Funk. So that's I'll pop that in when we put this to paper there or to the air. The Ethernet, that is. So Grand Funk in 1969, Inside Looking Out. So we got perspectives, and that's what we're going to be doing today, and taking a perspective.
Vinny, check
We're
your
in
signal.
public broadcasting and lost here. Check what?
Check your signal. You're breaking up a good bit there.
Signal. Okay, well, it shows I'm hanging in there. Let me just try something. I'll put it a little higher. That's the theme, right? Just a little higher. I think that was in there somewhere along today. A little bit higher standards. And so from Grand Funk, I feel all right, even with the pain and blisters in my hand, still like a newborn child. Feel it. Come on up and get down with me. That's where we're going to take a look. So I'm going to bounce back. I got a lot of stuff right here. But today is review number 3 on Bundyville. And we'll start a theme here, and we'll run through a little bit here. From Mike Stupper, thank you. Standing against powerful forces. That's what we're looking at here. And ye shall know the truth. We've got a couple of different tactics right here, and or ways of life or perspective, and we'll come to that, talking about truth. So from Carol Bundy, she says, the truth will set us free. The wonderful thing about truth, the beauty about truth, is that it is so easy to tell. We have variations that we're looking at here at different ideas of truth. From Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, I picked this up a little bit out from what he had to say at PBS Amanpour the other day. But he talks about faith, and he equates that to truth, grace, love, and hope. And he was talking about the taking the children in down on the border. But anyways, I found it relevant to today's topic. So grace is unmerited favors, and when you get to love, there's so many. There's such a variety of how you could take in and describe love. But hope, what is that? It's a feeling of trust, and that's where you want to feel like you're in life and you're living life as the best you could, and you have these boundaries, these scales that you weigh this in, what's right and what's wrong. So thank you, Samuel. Now, when we look at what we've got going on the other side, if you're accused of something, accuse your accuser of the same thing. Today, it's a signature political tactic of our time. From NPR, Kirk Siegler, thank you. down and back down. I got these out of order, so I'm bouncing back and forth between them right here, but that's part of the spaghetti bowl. Tay Wallace says prosecutors were on their back foot. That's telling the truth. Emphasis added right there about telling the truth, but that's what it really boils down to. Eric Shoemaker, she was. I listened to her testify during some evidentiary hearing before the jury was seated, and she really fumbled for the prosecution, and she's where things started coming to light. But she says nobody really understands the truth or wants to get to the bottom of what the truth actually is. That's what she said for the state. But typical. You want to get it's so subjective to this. We'll talk more about truth a little later on. So Leah goes on to say that Bundy's gone to extremes to keep his cattle on public land. And she goes on to give her an encounter with Miss Lauder, Melissa M.D. Lauder, and who is a Mormon, and takes her as an expert on the Latter-day Saint church doctrine, which there'd be a lot to be said about that. And she also says that Cliven asked Buddha to become his bodyguard and to be a witness. Throw up quotes around that witness. That's a key word there, as Melissa denotes. And then which followed, she realized, they're Mormons, and she says she's a member of the LDS Church, and so that sparked some religious debate. She said hearing some out of context scripture that she says was didn't fit with others. And Leah says, just like me, talking about Mormons, grown up with Mormons, but just didn't drink DP, Dr. Pepper. Talking about family values and apple pie, trying to really put them over. There's so much that Leah does here in her cohorts throughout in making this a setup. It's another layer, trying to build up this portrait that she's building and painting, and from the panorama that we see building and the layering, trying to make it 3D, trying to make this so real. But as we continue through this series, we'll see how she is layering up this idea. And I think, it's just pure propaganda. It's definitely biased. Now, for myself, I won't. I'm unapologetic about being a Bundy supporter and reporting on this. So we're moving on. Leah lies. So talking about the Nay book. She's with her conversation. Melissa asks if she heard about it, and Leah says no, but she had. And then she goes on something about I didn't believe it was real, and so forth, and into kind of a little bash on Lavoie there, and as target practice. That's a long leap right there, in a sense, to tie that two together. But it does move in that direction, as opposed to Lavoie and living for liberty. Rights are not gifts to man by another. Come down back to the bottom at Thomas Paine. But back to the top. The Nay book. Keith Nay, he was a neighbor of Cliven Bundy. And it's a compilation. It's inspired documents and writings from the prophets from the Mormon Church. And divinely inspired form of government. It's what that.
Get back to where you were before. You're dropping out. You must be walking around or something.
No, I'm not moving. I'm here. Okay. If I come back in.
Yeah, go.
All right. So I'll continue then. Thank you. I'll start back there. So talking about the Nay book, Keith Nay, being a neighbor of Cliven Bundy, and they put together some writings and certain things of interest to do with the preservation of the country and the Constitution as as seen by what is called fundamentalists later on. Leah will use that terminology. So anyways, and that the Constitution was part of this divinely inspired form of government of the United States. What is the constitutional duty of Latter-day Saint members is also part of the 12 Articles of Faith, and that is discussed. It builds to that this is used as a defense of his ranch against federal tyrannical usurpation. So we get back into the Constitution, Scripture, and writing of the prophets, and it's a pondering of this, whether it be government instituted of a God for the benefit of man, and holds man accountable for their acts in relation to them. So you asked earlier, Graham, in chat, what I mean by that. Well, this is you can equate it into law, natural law, common law in a sense. I hate to hang these titles on this stuff right here, and hold on just a second, and try to make this compartmentalized, which it's very much not. So what we're looking at is the free exercise of conscience, rights and control of property, protection of life, these unalienable rights we talk about. Thomas Paine, again, the origin of rights that are equal to all men. In a sense, we're looking at a tale of two entities, right? Peace and safety. And where does that come from? Do we have a right for collective self-protection? And are those entities that are purporting to do so actually looking for our best interests? Hal Anthony, Sundays, tune in Behind the Woodshed and find out a lot more about how that is given a notice in the news to us, and how we are under the occupation. So
now you mentioned unalienable rights.
Yeah.
And could that be
unalienable, inalienable? There's two different ways people like to say that, and I forgot to.
How about unalienable?
Unalienable, yeah. Minor Dave, some of you, the folks here at RLM for a while, remember way back when Flash and I were doing some No Time for Rational Thinking. Minor Dave, there's a debate there, though, that these unalienable, inalienable, and unalienable, liens being financial, and so all the constructs of how this thing that how the world is and how it runs, how they operate. So yeah, a lot of times people get bogged down and beyond just identifying the pattern, how this beast, this entity, right, how it operates, and seeing how it runs back and forth. And when you put yourself in front of it, it'll mow you down for sure. By God or government, that's the idea here. Natural law again. So peace is settled in the law, right? And in 2014, on April 12th, and as would go back to my testimony, early morning hours, and discussing Ammon Bundy, myself, and Jason Patrick, talking about great care. And Brand Thornton talks about this in the White Horse Prophecy that I asked him to do in preparation for this broadcast. So that's went out 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it will be included in the broadcast. So great care was given. We talked about this in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, about watching for those that would instigate any kind of trouble, and to isolate them. So peace is settled in the law. And what law? We're not talking about legal and code and all that stuff that gets convolution, but law, the right and the wrong, good. And we'll come to more of that later. There is a right and wrong. So we look at that, these two entities, and what was against this peace and safety, this great care that, we called for. And I say we, so I probably implicated myself again as a unindicted co-conspirator, right? I come to witness and stand for peace. And that is settled in the law. And the law does become convoluted in this radical infiltration of government. It's a separate nation versus this idea of a hedge roundabout by God or Gov. So the intro of part 3 from Leah starts out at, and ye shall know the truth. They're talking about prophecy and claims of Bundy going to extremes, and talking about cattle in the land, where this is supposed to be the point that Cliven just wants to run his cattle out here and not pay any fees. So Leah's hungover, and she's talking to Melissa, M.D. Lauder. This is about the 2014 Bunkerville and about LDS. Melissa met Buddha. Now, excuse me. Now, so Leah and her talking, and she's telling them this and that Cliven asked Buddha to be his bodyguard and to be a witness. Melissa then says that she gets this weird vibe. And so they go into their conversation like Melissa's an expert on Mormonism. And I say, what are we really with? Just like me, set for Sody Pop. That kind of a takeoff on Leah. But anyways, family values, freedom, liberty, and for God we stand. This is the Nay book. So Leah says the Bundys were trying to create their own view on a religious aspect. These philosophical, religious debates, and Melissa then goes versus the Bundy, talking about we entered into these philosophical, religious debates, and Leah says, and it was like, oh, we've got something here. Let's dig. We can build on this, and another layer of paint goes on. A new interpretation of Scripture, she claims, that Cliven Bundy and the cult, the Bundy cult, they like to say. Well, we all, well, don't necessarily we all don't, but at least I say their cult mentality of these patties. Melissa says it's kind of conspiratorial and apocalyptic, this end time stuff. And I add for emphasis versus the mainstream. Prophecy? Some say nay. Why Mormonism? Malheur. Why would you kill or die? It's an unclear cause. And Lavoie says, don't point a gun at me. Talks about our country and about freedom and getting the feds out of the state. Leah goes on to say of Lavoie that God told me, but I'm not religious, trying to make it play in that direction. Where Lavoie was indeed a man of faith and held very strongly in his religious views, and I think he was a good person. I met him the one time that we spoke back in 2014 in Bunkerville, and we've talked about that before. And meeting Jeanette in Las Vegas for the first time, I told her I don't have any words. I have absolutely no words to give to you, to say. But then we go back and we got people that do like to have words, play them as trump cards, calling it anti-government book, this Nay book. So back in 1995, BLM and Nay, they're not being controlled. And she's pulling out snippets, this and that. And Nay was talking about not being controlled by the BLM. She's, as I said, she either used my copy or Jamie's, and so it's over here on. I think it's here. Yeah, I think we got it up on BLM in the Bundy Ranch Standoff playlist. Anyways, and then Jamie Landon, he also shot it, and Mrs. B. Stacy, thank you for putting that video up of his, and I used a thumbnail there that took a screenshot of his video showing me in the background, and as I recall, there was nobody else recording. So thanks for giving credit. The rules of the press. I've talked about that. The rules are It's not how they deal with you or anybody else, but it's how you deal with them. And you start trying to use some of their stuff, and they claim copyright, la di da. But I found my stuff all over local news. I've been quoted and so forth. That it's very rare that you ever get any kind of accreditation from these people, and they would rip you one brand new for doing in kind. So anyway, she talks about distributing copies of this neighbook outside the courthouse. That's not true. Shauna Cox was reading it. And like I said, that video will be included in the podcast. So anyway, she starts bringing on talking with this guy, Matt Harris from the University of Colorado Pueblo, who gives some history on a book that he's written on Ira Benson, who was on Eisenhower's cabinet. He was the 13th president of the Church of Latter-day Saints. The U.S. Constitution was inspired, and that's this ideology, this ideologue that is prevalent in the White Horse Prophecy, the Ney book, and so forth, a combination and expression. So let's see where today Bundy's defense of the Constitution. She's talking about, thanks God, like it's his ideology that emboldens him and so forth. So fighting for the future of the country, hanging into the balance. When they were told by experts that they were wrong about the Constitution, so I'm using this emphasis in my speeches, but experts, these experts, she claims that, they're wrong because they're experts, but other people claim to be expert. Can't remember this person's name over here. Not a friend on Facebook, but making comment about Chris Ann Hall not being an attorney and you have to have a piece of paper to be a scholar from somewhere. So I don't know the particulars, but I think Chris Ann Hall's a pretty smart cracker. But she did equate him to Bruce Doucette and this judge, what's her name, and something over there back in Colorado. This common law grand jury theme that landed Bruce Doucette in prison expectably for the rest of his life. Terrible, terrible, terrible mistake. So let's see. Yeah, Leah then goes on to tell us about Joseph Smith and the founding of the Latter-day Saint Church and how the government didn't protect them, which is true. They even had state-sponsored terrorism, that is, with kill lists. And we find the kill list so familiar, revealed in the Woot memo, kill list, and all kinds of criminal stuff there when this hard roundup occurred back in the USS. Are you sure we're in America? Yeah, I've been back in the USSA. Who's going to apologize to these people that accused Germans of not doing nothing about the Nazis? Well, so as far as her wagons would take them, she says, beyond the Rocky Mountains is what Bran Thornton tells us when he talks about the White Horse Prophecy. So Levitt was one of the forefathers of Cliven, and so his lineage goes way back to contemporary with Joseph Smith, and so then he comes and settles in near and around Bunkerville. And Ryan Bundy spoke of this on his family line through there. So she says that as living as though the Constitution was inspired, Leah says mockingly, and that allowed them to live their religion, says Kate Flake. And her name is Catherine Flake. Where is she from? Oh, I forgot to write that down. Anyways, it's in the podcast. Yeah, definitely listen to the podcast. Play it for yourself and listen. So play on Joseph Smith and his death and this what she calls this up in quotes here this urban legend, the White Horse prophecy, talking about peace and safety and the United States Constitution being almost destroyed, as if it hangs by a thread, that the U.S. Constitution gives them the right to believe their God, that the church says is fake. She says about the white horse prophecy, declaring that the Mormon church says that, oh, yeah, it's fake. But I'm not too sure about that. Maybe some people, but there is a lot of people that don't believe it's fake, and I wouldn't think for a moment it's fake when you can really trace it back as it was recorded. Nonetheless, what does it make it true, or what is prophecy being, a foretelling? You can see why things work, and you can make a foretelling, whether it be religious prophecy or a educated guess. It all comes in running in the same line anyway. So where am I? Yeah. Did Smith say it? And if it should be taken as if, that's kind of paraphrased, but going on to the book of Revelation, where it ties together this heavy metal idea, as Leah calls it, of poetry and anxiety and woes, says Flake. Show them someday prophecy type, like that they are the true defenders of the Constitution. I lost that word. But hanging by a thread. This is Ezra Taft Benson. He's talked about it. So then she
Where'd you go?
brings
You just disappeared
in
there.
this idea of
You there?
the idea of the. Am I here?
Okay, there you are. You were saying something as she, and then you went away.
As she?
You were talking.
Oh, let's see. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll back up to that point.
All right.
The book of Revelation, and I'm glad she didn't say Revelations. That's a lot of people do that. And as soon as somebody says the book of Revelations, you know that they're really not qualified to quote from it. So, but Leah calls it heavy metal, this idea of poetry, anxiety, and woes, Flake calls it. And we'll show them someday prophecy, as Leah's back to like they're taking this up as a banner and a weapon, and that they are the true defenders of the Constitution. So Orrin Hatch, he's used this hanging by a thread. Also, Ezra Taft Benson, former president of the Church of Latter-day Saints. So is this government ordained by God? We're talking about using the John Birch Society connection and this anti-government Mormons and this one guy. We'll see more about that with Brand. A lot of Mormons became FBI agents in one of our discussions, so maybe we can catch up with him and pick up on that at some point. So this guy named W. Cleon Skosen is identified this anti-communist ideologue as they talk about him. He developed this pocket constitution. Everybody that's seen the Bundys and their supporters mainly have this pocket constitution in their shirt pocket, which reminds me that there is nothing near as handy as a shirt pocket for certain. So happy as slaves. Were they happy or slaves? This video, I've got it recorded. We'll include that in the log here as it comes along. Well, what I know about the Negro. And so these claims of Skosen being a racist and Vincent and others, and then the evolution of the church into the modern age and so forth. So whatever their, however that works out, I didn't go deep into that, but whatever. That would be more for later. Inclusivity, that is, versus their own views. And so we're talking about the white horse prophecy as being a discussion for the preparing for the return of Jesus Christ. Then she moves that from Cliven Bundy was took and went away from this idea of fighting over grazing fees and brings it into a religious offense that all this ideologue gives them this drive and motivation and clarity and justification and so forth. And what we see as liberty and equal protection of law would be probably on the opposite end of that scope there. And then from the National Center for Constitutional Studies is who put this pocket constitution together. Been millions and millions and millions distributed. It's one of the largest distributed book or publication at that time. I think it was on Amazon. So they call them a fringe Mormon group with this fundamental interpretation of the founding documents. So anyways, we move on in her podcast to the mistrial of December 2017. I think it was the 20th. And in my last week's blog, I made a mistake and said that the final dismissal came January the 10th of 2018. That dismissal with prejudice from Judge Gloria Navarro was actually December the 8th. And also I think the first episode, yes, number 1, it was the battle that I typoed Leah Sottile's Twitter handle, but subsequent podcast it's corrected. So anyways, what are we talking about? Ryan Bundy. So she's talking to Ryan Bundy and about faith, and that Ryan says that God wants man to be free, and she says the church didn't support the Bundys, and that goes into a little bit of hee-haw right there as they pass that back and forth. So that is actually specifically that the church didn't support the Bundys' actions at the Oregon occupation. So not saying that blankets everything else. So she kind of pigeonholed that right there and tried to get him to come out and stick his foot in there. So the Constitution would hang as if by a thread. Quote of the prophets of the church. The Nay Book, she calls it the Nay Book of photocopies, basically. And Ryan responds about, was this, she says, is this from the Nay Book, that you're talking about? He's talking about the hanging as if by a thread. And then Ryan goes on to say, it's what I've heard, it's what I've read, it's what I believe. Justification for what they believe is what Leah says, actions in Scripture. And says that it was distributed to save the Constitution. That they would be like a group is destined to save the Constitution. The White Horse prophecy is real and lives in Bunkerville. And its name is Bundy. Bum, bum, bum. There's her music. That's what she closes out. And next time in the living room, I think I already read this. No, I didn't. This was set up here. So the idea is truth in so many ways. And what's long past? Truth. Yeah, I was going to tell you about this right already. Truth. What? Right or wrong? Truth stands absolute. It's something that is true at all times and in all places. It is something that is always true, no matter what the circumstances. It is a fact that cannot be changed. For example, there are no round squares. And that came from an engine search there on the definition of truth. I asked, is it okay to steal, to kill, to destroy? So is it okay to take something that doesn't belong to you? No. Can you justify it? Some might, but still the answer is no. That is an absolute. Otherwise, theft is wrong, right? No matter whose name or claim of authority they put on it. So the thief comes not, but for to steal and to kill and destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. That's a quote from John 10:10. So this is the different ideologues here, considering this idea of man has a right to do as he will, as long as he's not harming somebody else's right to life and property, right? Now, this is a very interesting story about how I came to this passage here. But thanks, Michelle in Salt Lake City, for sending me this Book of Mormon. I have read some of it, and this is where I actually opened it up and started at. I think it's very interesting and relevant to follow up here. And it comes from the Book of Mormon, Ether 8, chapter 8, verses 18. And it came to pass they formed a secret combination, even as they of old. Talking about this conspiracy, and people are, ooh, conspiracy theory, but we can see a movement, an orchestration on how the world works. And so in the Book of Mormon, they see that going back into the beginning of creation. For the Lord worketh not in secret combinations, neither doth he will that man should shed blood, but in all things has forbidden it from the beginning of man. We're talking about Moroni here. He says, do not write the manner of their oaths in these combinations. That, they have these secret things, like we hear about what is that grove, Grimner, where they got the owl, and then they got the
Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, that grove, that
Bohemian
grove. Bohemian. Yeah, Bohemian, and then the what's a Skull and Bones, and the Illuminati, and they claim, and people have all types of little hands they put on it, from Mormon, or I'm sorry, to from Masons to Jesuits and so on. Let me see if I get down here to when I come. But anyways, these people that are working in darkness, right? So what is really right and wrong? If you hide what you're doing, then there's a good chance what you're doing may be wrong, and you don't want it to come to light. That is the beautiful thing about truth.
So answer me this, if you know, because I don't really know much about the whole Mormon group there. But don't they have like a high council that does everything in secret as well?
I don't know how that works. Brand would know more, but I would say probably, yeah, they have.
Because they
council.
decide by who gives how much money or whatever, who gets to go into what level of heaven.
Yeah, I really don't know about that, but I can tell you, I know this, that there is these levels of heaven that they would say, and so if you're not Mormon, but you're still a good person, if you're not a son of perdition, you might come to one of these other levels of heaven, and excuse me, whether there be any chance of ascension beyond that level, I don't know, but there a lot of people equate the Mormon what you call it, sacrament or whatever and stuff, as a secret combination, that particular sects of Mormonism would be part of that. And I've heard that accusation made by Melissa Lauder, that the Bundys are on the wrong side of the spectrum, and so forth. But again, I can't hardly take her as an expert. Now, she's saying something about fake Christian. I told her that be better off trying to call me the definition of a Muslim. And then I just slapped her back with her own little stuff and called her Jack Mormon. And it's ad hoc. I mean, ad hoc. But yeah, I try to stay away from that. And I really got to apologize for that. But I just get frustrated. I don't understand her. She is an enigma. I'm trying to sort through it, and I've some things I know about her that I haven't try not to use as a ruler, but you can't really help that when you hear people talk about somebody, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say, especially about Melissa. And I found her standing alone for the most part, as far as I can tell, and so it really strikes me as an oddity that she would take so much and expend so much extruding of herself in this fight against the Bundy. So it really does stand with me wondering why. Any Should you ask anything else of that?
What's that?
Okay, I was just seeing if maybe you had any more questions.
No, I was just, because you were talking about the dark and secret groups, and I'm pretty sure that the Mormons have a similar setup. I remember when the Mormons built a big old temple, tabernacle, whatever you want to call it, down in San Diego County in the like Del Mar Scripps Ranch area, and it was very limited as to who could actually go in and see the workings of that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you have to. I think you have to be baptized or something in the temple and this and that. But I can tell you what I do know about Mormons. Now, my grandmother on my mom's side lived there in Mawapa Valley, and she converted to Mormonism. I've known a lot of Mormons in my life, and there's jokes about how many Mormons take fishing with you too, so to watch the other for not drinking your beer. But that's this idea of Jack Mormons, people that aren't in practicing their faith. But I tell you what I know about the Bundys, and this is that they are a people of faith. They are good people, um, and I support them. Now, a lot of times the people, are fumbling their way through life, and that's where we're at, and we've got to work our way through. And as I told the FBI agent Ryan English in Denver court about Bruce Doucette's trial, that we're in this place in the world and time, the timeline of history, where we as individuals have the opportunity to come together and actually converse and discuss this idea of what it is that we are in, the wholeness of the world about us, and who's in contention and who's in control. This evil versus wickedness that Brad Thornton's going to, I'll be discussing some of the notes that I took on the White Horse Prophecy. That was some times back. There's some specifics I'll leave out. The doctrines and covenant, and the law of the land and the Constitution will be of discussion. So evil versus wickedness. So wickedness is more of a self-centeredness, and it's tried unto death in a sense. That's how the judgment comes, whether you be found righteous or unrighteous. The wicked in judgment on into the religiosity. So evil that is against good. There's no wiggle room. It's purely religion or rebellion against God. Talking about the White Horse Prophecy, these feelings of being persecuted. Days before Joseph Smith's death, he was on the run. So they normally Joseph Smith would have these chronographers or stenographers and so forth, and they'd take they'd be writing several of them, and so there was only two guys here. They wrote this down, and it has been passed down through time to prosperity, and so it's been around since where's it at? Somewhere. I think I wrote the date down. But the Constitution will hang by a thin silk thread. Again, the theme, and it does seem to be so today. We've got calls for constitutional convention and so forth. But different states being in the state of partial withdrawal from the union and so forth. Joseph Smith says the saints will go to the Rocky Mountains. And the U.S. government would take some of the rights from them, some of these Mormons, and they would continue to petition Congress and the government to get these rights back. And the Edward Tucker Law of 1877 tells about how they were taking they absolved the Mormon Church, I think, for about 3 years. Then going on towards the 23 Clause that is talking about the Ottoman Empire, World War I, the Balfour Agreement, and Jews back to Palestine. that right there is a setup for the takedown, and how Anthony had a lot to say about that, and actually that this lineage and this claim to ownership of this land or this right or this passed down thing. Talking about more of that in a minute. Encircled about by myth and stories, it's said. The 37th clause of the White Horse Prophecy is beyond the Rocky Mountains. He talks about, Brand does, excuse me, about the Pacific Partnership, about toll booths in Chinese, and I'd like to see more. Think about the Panama Canal and how they took that over when Carter gave back the canal to the Chinese. And I wonder where we were actually that, because we see continuing transference of national resources, natural resources, the source. Take off the re, right, Hal? Where was I? Yes, back up. Yeah, the Panama Canal. And how paying down the debt. Yeah, all these little secret combinations. Again, behind really the hidden in the dark is like, put a bill up of 40,000 pages. It should only take one page, really. That's what I would think. So it was said then to take great care against the heathen Chinese, and their spearhead is, and would say that this into this area, this hedge roundabout, trying to pierce it, this place of peace and safety. They call the Deseret. Joseph Smith would call Israelites. Open to all, this place is land of peace and safety in this coming time. And by the covenant, the land was given to them, Zion. That is talking about the house of Israel, and specifically to the descendants of Ephraim. Talking about patriarch and blessings, and wards being part of stakes. You're talking about, that was your question, actually. What is a patriarch, Grimner, to Brand?
Let me ask you this. You say by covenant the land Zion was given to them, meaning to the Mormons, right?
Well, okay, so the Mormons, you got 10 tribes. They say the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and they came
12
before.
tribes.
Yeah, so 10 of them came to the Americas. Then there was descendants here. There's a lot to that. They talk about elephants, these ancient empires, and then great wars. And Alma, I believe, in the Book of Mormon, talks about going and talking or prophesying and preaching for peace and for the coming of Jesus Christ. So after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ in the area that is now known as Palestine.
Does it explain in there what this covenant was, who wrote it, where did it come from? You say,
well, it comes from the Old Testament, and I can't give you verse and scripture or that chapter and verse, that is, but talking about the descendants of Joseph on down, the descendants of Abraham. And then Hal gets into this very good in talking about how these branches all went, and they had like claim to this area, but they were dispersed. You go back in the early history in the 70s, dispersal after Rome came back and sacked and tore down the temple. And but anyways, all this stuff goes back into the Scofield Bible, and it was really setting up this idea that these Jews could become blackers. They left black and came back white. These Zionists.
You cut out. You said something about these Jews that, and then you cut out.
Yeah, they left. The Jews that left black left Palestine and came back white. These Khazarian folks here that are the majority of these Israel, this occupation of Israel and Palestine. That's Israelis, not Israelites. As we saw the distinction talking about these the descendants of the 10 lost tribes that came to America. And there's a great war. There's different peoples, and there's a lot of history into that they're going to be talking about. But the boys from the mountain is just talking about too in the White Horse Prophecy, that they would be found holding up the Constitution in the hour of need. Brad talks about Eric Parker, Ricky Loveland, and Stephen Stewart and Todd Ingle, who were on the bridge and sacrifices for their fellow men. Talking about Waco and Kill List and Ruby Ridge and the Battle of Bunkerville. Now, in the White Horse Prophecy here in the video on Real Liberty Media on our YouTube channel, 24 minutes in, Brand gives us reads us the White Horse Prophecy verbatim. It was written, put to pen, May 18th, 1843. The Nauvoo Review, I call it, to the overthrow of the mobocrats and persecutions of we the people than what they have endured. And going back to that Edward Tucker Law of 1877, which would be to come. In talking about a great and mighty people, this, as Joseph Smith was his words were being written down. I will never go there, Joseph Smith said, the land is to this land of peace and safety. But he says to continue to petition the government, the Constitution will hang by a thread. Goes on to talk about the white and red horse, and the red horse being Native Americans and Mormon and the Native relations, and a place to flee to unto safety. This coming time, which this place here will come to be a place with great minerals, great wealth, and it'll come from miss myself here. And wealth to come, gold shoveled up like sand, coming coming financial collapse into the government, and the cessation of states is talked about. This coming bad time of collapse, and without supreme government. So peace will be taken from the earth, except for the land of Zion. Now, this isn't the land of Zion claimed in Palestine, but here, this area of the Rocky Mountain region. And it would be keeping laws unto safety and preaching of the gospel. That's what we're getting out of the White Horse Prophecy, this book that's put together. Now, what we're looking at is globalism and reconciliation between the Catholic and the Protestant Church. Howell has also talked about that, and the Protestants left with the nailing the thesis by Martin Luther, and then so that moves off in from the Protestants. The Protestants, we've got a lot of different denominations and sects and beliefs come from the Christian ideology. Talks about empires and clash, and with this England and Russia and so on, these power bases. Then he moves to talking about the black horse in these terrible times, and as the white horse gathers strength. So God set up a kingdom, it says, never to be thrown down. That's what the coming expectation is in this prophecy. Countries submit to the authority, bound by iron. So the white horse and the red horse are protectors and give the law unto Zion. And
okay, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. So you mentioned that the red horse was the indigenous folk here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is the white horse white people?
No.
Or the black horse black people?
No.
Just the red horse.
It would go to follow, but
I mean, just the red horse is the indigenous folk, but the white and the black are not people.
Yeah, I should have actually looked a little bit more in the Book of Revelation and give that description. Now the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So they take one and relate to another. It's like onion, layers and stuff. So it could apply at one point in time to one thing and to another. I guess, and that's what you get into the convolution of
Buster,
ideologues and
but Buster asks no gray area because the pale horse was a gray horse, right?
probably, yeah. Who was it? Cooper talked about the pale horse, and um,
And the pale horse was what, pestilence?
yeah, I don't remember. I didn't take time to go to look at those out in context of other ideologies. So anyway, so they're taking this and uh, throughout the Bible, what is called prophecy. Different people take it different ways, and then when you start taking the idea of people's writings and Ellen White with the Seventh Day Adventist, and everything being penned from her hand and so forth. Some people would take it to be prophetic and conclusive. And so, of course, we have the appeal to authority, which is a logical fallacy. And in a sense, there's when you base, it doesn't matter if your perception, okay, but if you base your perception beyond what is right and good, uh, then you go off into this realm of what Leah Sottile would have you believe that Ryan Bundy, I mean, and Cliven Bundy is, that he's a religious wacko, and she's setting up this clan, this cult ideology mentality of Bundy and those folks that come along. A lot of people, most people were not even a part of the latter day church that came to the protest, that pushback in Bunkerville and on up into Malheur. They do bring out those that have been they feel that are been mistreated, by government, and there's this a sense that people are seeking for coming together and righting wrongs, and sometimes how people think that they can right a wrong isn't necessarily right. Could be wrong, a wrong. So. Okay. Um,
Yeah, okay. I was just reading up on the what these horses are here, and
okay.
the white horse is actually pestilence. And there's
Okay. Hey, wait one second, Grimner. Let me ask you a favor. Let me hand you the mic. Read that real quick, and I'll be back in about 2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
Well, this is from Wikipedia, so take it for what it's worth. But according to Wikipedia, the white horse here, it says, "Then I saw the Lamb broke open one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying, as with the voice of thunder, 'Come.' I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer." From Revelation 6:1-2 from the New American Standard Bible. I'm not really familiar with that one. But anyway, if you read down further in this, they talk about the infectious disease, and the first horseman, the white horse, is called pestilence. And they've referenced various different things here on that. Then they talk about the red horse. And it says, "When he broke the second seal, I heard a second living creature saying, 'Come.' And a red horse went out to him who sat on it, and it was granted peace from earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him." And that's from Revelation 6:3-4. And apparently this red horse was also known as Justice. Oh wait, not Justice. As what the hell was this one called? War. The red horse was War. Then it goes on to the black horse. It says, "When he broke the third seal, I heard the living creature saying, 'Come.' I looked, and behold, a black horse, who sat on it with a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for denarius, but do not damage the oil and the wine. That's Revelation 6:5-6. And that horse is famine, and with the scales and also justice. And then the pale horse, it says, when the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, an ashen horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following him. Authority was given to them over 1/4 of the earth, and to kill with the sword and famine and with pestilence, the previous three horses. Um, these are not good horses and wild beasts of the earth. So that's Revelation 6, 7, 8 there for that. Um, and Frumpy is picturing me at a full podium in a 200-seat church preaching. And Arkaluya for sure.
And Arkaluya. That's good. Well, let me actually back up just a little bit for clarification. So these ideas of these horses, this I put in my notes. This is not the coming in the clouds, this law unto Zion by God. So there's like many horses maybe coming, before the one that you talked about there in the book of Revelation from chapter 6. So this is kind of waiting for the coming of the Lord, preparing it in a sense. And this is where Leah says that this their ideologue. It is necessary for them to believe this and to say that this is what they're working for. Excuse me. That was a mini burp. A backfired poot. Power to the white horse. Law goes forth from Zion to the whole of America. And this is goes into this apocalyptic view of versus Russia and China, that what is called Zog and Magog. Brand says, great care by the militia and protesters were given. That goes back again to my statement as far as my testimony. So more to come, I ask. And remember, you relayed these questions. Is there more of this type to come? You asked Brand for me, and Brand says that this is now in God's hand to protect his people. And the court case was a demonstration of this, and also talking about protection from calamities and natural disasters, as well as the lawlessness that will come at the collapse of government. If you don't love it, leave it. That was getting towards the end of the video from Brandon. Somebody from the chat there on the YouTube talked about that. And Brand goes on to demonstrate what this is, this infiltrated government, and not going to leave it, fighting for it, because they have this investment that is the Constitution. Goes on to talk about Brigham Young and the territory of Deseret, and this hedge around about, and coming from adverse possession. Clive Bundy talks about adverse possession and rights and so forth. Also talked about the polygamist and the descendants, and they settled Brand and Cliven and many others there for they come about in this region after this adverse possession and settlement by their ancestors. Why is this taking so long? Frumpy asked, and Brand goes on to relate God's timetable, and he talks about the Seventh-day Adventists in 1844 having given and sold their possessions and given away and thought that the Lord was coming that day. A misinterpretation of some ideologue. So blessed are they that wait upon the Lord, he says, and talking about the hour and the day that nobody knows, and doing the right thing. Now, this is really where we should all be looking to be found, doing the right thing when the Master comes, and your testimony would be then. We're talking about. He also talked about the the fig tree, the parable of the fig tree when it blossoms. And so it's putting on fruit, and that's what our actions would be, is fruit. He also talked about the Mayan 2012 calendar being a new era, and that solar flare that hit and rang Earth like a bell. Talked about the Magi's and amazing things, the future popping up. The BLM has lit its last fire. Just what Cliven said. And coming more from the Wooten memo, Todd Engel, the Department of Interior, and Cliven Bundy. Talking about Gloria Navarro and sealed documents in this second Wooten memo. And so future events, and you spell that E, capital VINCE. Future. Bye-bye, BLM. That's kind of the theme. That's where he says that that's where we're headed. They got a bad rap. And so does plural marriage, he says, the institutions of God, marriage and Sabbath, sanctified being, two of those. That government involvement in marriage, it's gone to the dogs. So remember May, when he's talking about people marrying dogs. But that's a red herring across the trail, and you know what a red herring is. It's mean to distract you from the trail, lover boy. DNA and all the best. He talked about the seed unto his brother, and supposed to spilt on the ground. As we're coming to the end of that video, Frumpy pointed out about taking the piss and that off the porch. And so thanks, Brandon. Thank you, Grimner. And that was coming to this long review. And I asked, where is the harm? Take a pounder, Gander. Wish you happy trails, and I hope you found some cowboy logic. And I'll tell you, I can't explain it to you, but I can't make you understand it. Can't understand it for you. So stuck on stupid. You might say the same about me. And spell that STPID. And here's some trivia in this. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? You'd be a good man to be able to tell me, Grimner. How many licks does it take? This is Modern Marvels we're talking about.
0.
No. You got to actually, it's a lick. You know, you don't have to lick it all the way around, but from one side all the way to the middle. How many licks does it take? Let's take some guesses from our chatters.
I'm going to say 0. All you got to do is bite it.
No, you can't bite it. You got to lick it from one side to the middle. How many? Take a guess. It's more than 100.
I don't got to lick it. You got to lick it.
Lick it real good. So that was a lot of pages. I wrote a lot on this one this week. And I'll have some links and stuff to add to this into the blog. And be along tomorrow as I rejoin the Dork Table with my good friend Flash, who's flipped and flew the coop, and he's way over across the water in Denmark. And he and I are going to do some dorking. Dork. What do you think about that?
You got to do what you're good at.
Yeah. Well, shooby-dooby. Next week, it is in Clive and Bundy's living room. Leah finally gets to get out there and sit down with Clive. And now, let me tell you something I know about Leah. Tilly. I saw her up there in the courtroom and saw her creeping by, back and forth. Real a mousy person. Then I don't know if you really understand what that means, but I found that to be kind of typical, kind of mousy was the type of person up there on the left of this perspective and reporting for mainstream media. Leah, Tay Wiles, Maxine Bernstein, a little bit older, but same type. The nerd girl in a way. And
I find that the term mousy is misapplied more often than not.
How would you describe what mousy is?
Well, very timid. It would be the basic
view
of that. But and you may see somebody as timid, but they may just be reserved and listening and paying attention and being quiet until the time comes when they're not.
That's me, the mouse that roared. Just don't push me in the corner.
Yeah,
I'll show you my hat trick.
yeah. You keep that one to yourself.
Uh, well, it's getting closer and closer to me, rounding back out of Arkansas. Looks like I think here in a week or two, I'm going to go buy me a ticket and I'm going to head west again. And so I've not finished my travels, and I'm going to go hawking about again, looking what I can see with the Ponder Gander, but with intention of heading up to Portland for that FBI agent that fired on Lavoie there at his death. Oh, yeah, guess what? I haven't put it on. Gotta go back down and get it, but I have it out. I call it my Finnegan jacket. It's a Levi denim jacket, just like the one that Lavoie was wearing when he was executed up there on that lonely stretch of snowbank there. And I want to get something that would simulate a 9mm and show you how that in the pocket would be very evident when as a bulge and as a sway in his jacket when he got out of the truck in that video from Shauna Cox. So I'm gonna. That's in plans there to demonstrate that. That I think they planted the gun. They probably retrieved.
Yeah, you should maybe
It.
think about painting on some bullet holes in the places where he was shot with some blood dripping down there.
Well, yeah, I could put like little round dot stickers, and I might even have some of those and
Yeah,
demonstrate that.
or
Yeah,
just do it with a pen, whatever.
sure,
You could do it.
but I don't want to. I want it to come off. Yeah, but I have a red marks a lot, but it would stay there. I guess it would be something. Then you put the LV, the Lavoie brand on there, and would make a statement. Killed by crimes of the state, huh?
Murdered.
From the kill list. Yeah, yeah, murdered. Absolutely. So I believe I've gone through everything I have here.
All right, man. Well,
Just like a real good man. That's how I finished that up. And we did not. I did not quote Kelly Stewart this week. I did the first two. I thought she did a real good job of describing this hit piece, slur piece. She called it slur piece. Oh, 7-Eleven, 911. All these numbers, they just don't add up, do they?
They do not.
Okay. Well, thanks, Grimner. I appreciate
All right,
it again.
man. Well, you folks listening tonight at her normal time, 7 p.m. Eastern, is Grammy Mary and Grammy's Rocket Chair right here on RLM Radio. And then at 11 Eastern is myself and the Moose Girl. Moose Girl will be back tonight after having a couple weeks off. It's a Freakers Ball, so that'll be fun. Tune in for that. And then tomorrow is the Dork Table, as mentioned, with Flash and Vin E at noon Eastern. I'll be on Sunday at noon Eastern with the Blues, and we'll be playing trivia here in the chat. Then at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon o'clock Pacific, Hal and Anthony behind the woodshed, opening up that big old can of whoop ass. Gary L. and Gigi's Boo on Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern on the road less traveled. And then Grammy will roll back again on Wednesday at her normal time. And I think that covers the show info.
All right. Thank you, Graham.
All right, thank you. Peace.
All right.